I like this problem. It's asking us to find the inverse of the following function right here. So the function, the f of x, is the square root of x minus 2. And one thing that's very important is to understand that there is a domain restriction. You know that whatever is under your radical cannot be negative, so it has to be positive. So before we actually work this where we switch the x and the y, I'm going to graph this function right here, the square root of x minus 2. So we know that the basic shape of this is the zinger, which would start here at the origin and look like that. It's the top part of a sideways parabola. And I do have a transformation. This thing is moving 2. It belongs to the x, so it's going to move on the x-axis. And since it's a minus 2, it will move 2 to the right. So this is what that graph looks like. Okay, that is the graph of the square root of x minus 2. Now the inverse is going to reflect across this line right here. Okay, and this is the line y equals x. And remember, with the inverse, we will replace our y with our x and our x with our y. Okay, so we're saying that they're equal to each other. So this is what my inverse graph should look like. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and work the problem, and then we'll have to come back and remember something right here. So finding the inverse. This is the f of x, we call that y. Y equals the square root of x minus 2. Now, to find the inverse, we're going to switch the x and the y. So I'm going to rewrite my equation, and it's going to be x equals the square root of y minus 2. All right, now once we solve for the y, we will have our inverse function. So we're going to square both sides. All right, and that's going to give us a new equation where the y is not under the radical. And now I have x squared equals y minus 2. Add that 2 to both sides, and then my y is going to be by itself. So y equals x squared plus 2. Okay, this is the inverse function. So I'm going to write it right here. The inverse function is x squared plus 2. Okay, so this is your answer of what the inverse function is, but there is something more that we have to say. Now, if I wanted to graph this, x squared plus 2, we know that the basic shape of x squared is a parabola. So, right, the big smiley face. So if I did a smiley face, I add 2, which shifts it not in the x direction, it doesn't belong to the x, but in the y direction, this is what your graph would look like. It would be the whole smiley face. But you notice that down here in the purple, we don't have this part of it right here because of that domain restriction. All right, so that tells us that we're only taking half of it. So to have the inverse, it is going to be x squared plus 2. But we only have the right side of it, okay? Everything from 0 to infinity. We don't have this part that would normally go over here. So your answer has to be x squared plus 2, and you have to specify x is greater than or equal to 0. Adding to this, we know that the domain for the original function and the range for the original function will switch out with our domain and range for our inverse function. So I'm going to go ahead and list them here. You could see that your domain for the original function, the purple, right? Domain is all your x values. It starts here at 2 and it goes on forever to the right. So our domain is 2 to infinity, bracket, parenthesis, and our range is how high up and down it goes. So you can tell it starts here at 0 and it will rise forever. So this is 0 to infinity. Okay, and 0 is included, bracket. And if you look at your orange inverse function, you will see that the domain, all your x values, starts here at 0, and it will go to the right forever. So 0 to infinity. And the range is how high up and down it goes. We don't have anything down here. It starts at 2 and goes up forever. So that is 2 to infinity. All right, and now look at your domain and range for the original function and the inverse function. Okay, your domain, which is your x values, become your y values. All right, your range, which is your y values, become your x values for the inverse. All right, and if we had not done that, if we still left this part over here to the left, your domain would have been all real numbers, and you would have said, okay, wait, they're not the same. So that will also help you when you graph it to understand this restriction right here that you have to put. Okay, so this is your answer. The inverse of x, inverse function is x squared plus 2, and you have to say that x is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, if you need domains and range, they're down here.